Pat McDonald,
Yes.
HollywoodChicago.com's Pat McDonald, the Uber critic, back once again. I forgot. Why are we talking about this particular movie? What sparked this in a previous conversation or in your imagination? I can't remember where this came from.
Two things. It's summer.
Yes, very much so.
And it's the 50th anniversary of the film.
That's right.
Yeah.
And the film we are talking about is The Summer of 42, which came out in
Da, da, da,
1971.
da. When you say summer of 42, the theme automatically has to come up.
Yeah, it's here's the thing. When did you first see this movie?
Oh, Christ. In the 70s on TV, probably. It's the Citizen Kane of Horny Boy movies.
I think I just came up with the thumbnail image for this episode.
But no, it had a reputation when I was a kid because it was about sex, and not many American films were about sex. And just Jennifer O'Neill was fairly well known as a model actress, of some reputation. So yeah, it was like you wanted to see this thing. I'm just being honest.
No, I mean, and I understand the appeal. I remember, and we may have talked about this on the last episode when we were discussing possibly talking about this movie.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm misremembering it, please correct me. But this movie was on HBO a lot when I was a kid.
Ah, yes.
And I never had seen the entire thing all the way through, but I had seen one stretch of this film, about 10 minutes, over and over again. It's almost as if whenever I was passing HBO and the movie was on, it was always on this exact same spot. And I kept watching. It was when the boy goes into the drugstore to buy condoms. And then later they have this date, this double date, and, horrible / wonderful things are discovered. It's strange that I must have seen that scene like 20, 25 times in my youth. And this week was the first time I've ever seen the entire hour 47.
All other ends of it.
Yeah.
I mixed up the druggist scene. I had mixed it up with the similar scene in American Graffiti where he buys liquor.
Mm.
Where Toad buys liquor, and he buys all these items in the store and then says, "Oh yeah, and a bottle of Old Harper." And then he puts it all in the bag. He goes off to see ID on the. But this one was actually funnier, and I like the fact that the druggist, even though they had to go round and round, beautifully done, by the way, between the two actors, even though it had to go round and round, he understood. He was a horny boy at one point.
Well, it's just because I think that he was trying to figure out this entire time. I don't know that he knew he was going to buy condoms. I thought he just figured he was this just weird kid and kind of socially awkward. And then when it dawned on him what this was all about, then it kind of sunk in like, oh, yeah. But, in a different kind of movie, I think he would have played the sort of the town prude, like, who are your parents? And I'm not selling this to you. He's like, no, as you put it, he was a horny young boy too at once.
Well, also too, that this is according to Herman Raucher, who wrote the screenplay for Watermelon Man, by the way.
That's right.
Which we've discussed earlier.
Yes,
episode
and it's
369. Look it up. No, I don't know what episode.
Well, that would be amazing if it were, but I don't think it is. But one other thing, that is another case of us being prescient in talking about movies, because I don't know if it's Criterion or Kino. One of those outfits is releasing a Watermelon Man. Oh, I think it's Criterion, because they're coming out with the Melvin and Van Peebles collection in a couple months, and Watermelon Man is finally going to be on Blu-ray.
Wow. That's going to be a good rediscovery for people.
Yeah.
But so Herman Raucher swears that everything that happened in the film happened to him in that titular summer, if you will.
We're going to talk about all of this. Let's set up the movie first, because it's about this kid named Hermie, who is played very well by, there's a lot of actors in here that I didn't really recognize from other places. You said that Jennifer O'Neill was a model, and I
Well,
looked her up briefly. She was in Scanners, I guess, a little bit later on, but she's such a presence in this movie that I'm like, why have I not seen her in a million other things?
yeah, it's interesting. And her agent, according to Wikipedia, really pushed her for her to get the role, even though she was only 22. And they were thinking maybe the woman was a little older, but actually Herman Raucher didn't know either. Thus Hermie, that he used all the real names too of his friends and the woman Dorothy. He never knew her last name.
Well, so it's this. Do you know what island this takes place on? It's like it felt like the Hamptons or
right.
someplace in
It was
Connecticut. I don't know.
supposed to be Nantucket.
Oh,
And I
okay.
know a man from there, and everything he is greatly exaggerated.
You're making that up. No, yeah, I know.
That's an old Simpsons line. But anyway, yeah, it was supposed to be Nantucket, and they actually filmed it in California because the real location had gotten overbuilt, and you couldn't have that, feeling that film had, because it really was about isolation. These kids were like trapped in this summer home situation where they didn't have a driver's license, so they couldn't do anything except go to the movies. And oh, by the way, when the movie they saw was Now Voyager with Bay Davis and Paul Heinried, and I was like, well, I looked it up. Oh yeah, it came out in 42, but then I found out it came out in October of 42. Thus, it wouldn't have played in the summer.
It's practically a Fear Street situation. The anachronisms are just all over the place. No, but you said they went to the movies. One of the details I loved about this is they pretty much go to the movie because Hermie, the young kid played by Gary Grimes, he is on sort of a date situation. He runs into the older lady Dorothy at the movie, and later he asks, "Would you like to go to the movies with me?" I mean, they're showing the same one.
Yeah. Well, in those days too, though, they did switch him every week. I don't know if that was the policy of the Nantucket Theater.
It just felt like they don't get movies on this island, so they show the one that is theirs is going to be there for a month or something.
Probably true.
But Gary Grimes is another one. I don't know what else he has been in, but
I think he did a lot of TV in the 70s. I'd have to look up his filmography.
The thing that strikes me about this is it's like the predecessor to the teen sex comedy, because for as much as this movie is about sex, there's no nudity in it. Everything is implied. I mean, this is still like 9 years away from Porky's. I just feel like Bob Clark was like, oh yeah, I can do you one better. I'm going to set it 10 years later and we're going to have boobs and bush galore. But there is something in the that I'm sorry, that's Porky's, but in its innocence, what it captures, it makes up for in the lack of gratuitous nudity or any nudity. It really captures that sense of awkwardness and what it's like to be a teen boy. I was having such cringy flashbacks of recognition. I'm like, this is how, unfortunately, teen boys, I think, at least when I was a kid, 50 years separated, still talk to each other. And it's very candid and honest and uncomfortable to watch.
Well, also, too, there's always that one guy in your group that breaks out and he's going to, tell you everything about sex or how horny he is or who's, what, comparing girls in your class, whatever. I mean, my best friend when I was a kid, I mean, he was an early bloomer. He was hot to trot, baby. He went after everything and anybody. And I was just like, what the hell? We were playing baseball last summer. I thought we were going to play baseball this summer. No, I got to see somebody.
Well, it sounds like he was busy rounding bases on his own.
There you go.
But
right on.
But in this case,
he hit a home run. It was a different thing.
Oh, yeah. Well, in this movie, that character is Oski, played by Jerry Hauser, who I don't remember him being in Slapshot, but apparently he was also in Slapshot, the hockey movie that I loved.
I remember him from Slapshot. He also has the distinction of being one of the Brady grooms. When they did the show, The Brady Brides, and Jan and Marcia, I don't know if Cindy got married, but Jan and he was Marcia's husband-to-be, and then played that role throughout the whole iteration of that. You know, they kept bringing it back, and there
This
would
was
be
a
Jerry
show?
Hauser. Yes.
It sounds like
After the Brady Bunch was canceled in the mid 70s, they had a variety show. All right. And then they had the Brady Brides, which was sort of a, I don't know, series of films. I mean, it ended up with Mike Brady running for president or something. It was very bizarre. But all through that, Jerry Hauser was there.
So this was post Nixon, right? So was
Yes.
Greg Brady running against, like, I don't know, Carter or somebody, or was this like proto Reagan?
It was Mike.
And Mike. That's even stranger.
It was. You look up the filmography; it's pretty funny. I wish I could think of the names of these movies. I know the Brady Brides, but after the Brady Brides, seriously, there was 4 or 5 movies, including a very Brady Christmas, and I believe Hauser's in that.
I remember that when I was a kid. I because I was the 80s, I remember, but I barely remember like watching it. But so yeah, this kid, Oski, and all the 3 boys have very strange names. It's Benji, Oski, and Hermie. You know, just
Yeah,
they all sound like names that kids give each other to tease.
It's supposed to be like Oscar, I guess, but why are you come up with that nickname for Oscar? What's wrong with Oscar?
I don't know. But the thing that really weirded me out, as much as I like Jerry Hauser in this movie, the behavior, the language, and even to an extent, I could see this happening, of him growing up to be Harvey Weinstein. I think the ages just about line up, because the way he talks about women, and a lot of this is not to excuse it, but it did feel very authentic to that teenage boy experience of like not knowing anything about women. And they're just kind of like, this is what people do. And they're sort of objectified. But there's some stuff that he says that I'm like, wow, that's creepy.
If these guys are alive, dude, they're in their 90s. You know,
yeah,
they were 15 the summer of 42. That would have made them 1927.
Well, here's the thing, Pat.
It would be 93.
I went
94 if they were alive.
I went to art school, so math is not my strong suit. Yeah,
I just know that because that's around the time my dad was born. For example, my dad was 5 years old in the summer of 42.
Wow.
So there you go. There's a comparison.
Now, so what did you think of, were you uncomfortable at all watching Oski? Because at the same time I recognized it, I was also like, who is he going to grow up to be?
Well, I wasn't thinking that. I remember, and you bring up a good point where you say this movie will make the adolescent boy in you uncomfortable, because every adolescent boy went through a similar circumstance. It might have not been exactly the same, but the thoughts and the pursuits and the language, everybody has to go through that, okay? And that's what made me uncomfortable when I first saw it in the 70s. I'm like, ooh, because I was in that phase. I'm like, this isn't working for me. It's too weird. It was just too weird. I didn't like Oski's character then. I liked him more now because I saw him more as human. He was just a human being, and he was just trying to, kill this boredom on this stupid island. And he made mistakes. We all do, but he did get laid. God bless him. He nailed a blonde. Excuse me. Let us take that part out.
It's all staying in, because we're going to talk about that. Here's the thing. He did not
say anything anymore.
Look, the fact that we're doing an episode on the summer of 42 is going to get us canceled anyway. But no, I want to talk about this situation because I want to correct you. First of all, he didn't nail a blonde. She taught him a thing, or 15, 16.
She wanted it. And what was interesting was that the movie, she seemed totally disinterested. And suddenly the whole thing flipped at a 180. Suddenly she was ready to go, as they say.
And that's, you have to kind of take a step back from this. It's one thing to watch this when you're in that kind of age. But for me watching it now, it occurs to me that all these kids are like 15 years old.
Yeah.
And so to see that,
yeah.
well, this girl Miriam, who they pick up at the movie theater as sort of a weird double date, Oski puts the moves on her. She rejects him, and then eventually they kind of get to know each other. They go on another double date, and they have sex. And Oski is not prepared for how experienced this girl is. She's like experienced way past what you would think of any 15-year-old girl, certainly back in 1942. So then I started thinking, okay, what's going on here? Is is there something dark going on in her life, or is she just freewheeling and ahead of her time?
She did have an appendectomy, so that could have been an abortion. Who knows? But
oh my God, I didn't even think about that.
The actress was named Christopher Norris, which I thought was odd too. The blonde was named Christopher Norris.
Well, I was watching this on Amazon, and I was doing that thing where I pause when I see an actor or an actress who I think is really cool. I'm like, where have I seen this person? I go and I see Christopher Norris. So I thought, okay, maybe later on in life she transitioned or something, but then in the end credits it comes up and it's this young blonde actress named Christopher Norris. I don't know. But I've never heard of I've never heard of a woman named Christopher. Maybe this is, have you?
No, it was very unusual. And Catherine Allentuck, who played Augie, who was Hermie's date, she is a daughter of Maureen Stapleton. And Maureen Stapleton played the mother off camera. She was the voice of the mother.
Wow.
Classic off-voice mother. She may have invented it. Who knows?
I thought it was a grandmother because it's such a mature voice. I'm like, oh, is he staying with the grandparents? But this feeling, and we'll get back to the date in a bit. But one of the things I thought was interesting, the sense of boredom was so absolute that early on, the kids, I think it might have been Oski had said, damn it, I wish someone would invade this island just so something would happen. This is the year after Pearl Harbor.
Right, the summer after Pearl Harbor.
And so that is, that's a too soon joke if I've ever heard it. And it sort of speaks to a lot of what is going on, the undercurrent of this coming of age story that's kind of a sex dramedy, but the war is very much in these people's lives.
Yeah. I mean, the guy going away and then being killed very quickly, I think it was the Pacific Campaign that invaded Japan, but I'd have to see the timeline, because right after Pearl Harbor, they got together and started a plan to bomb key points in Tokyo. Jimmy Doolittle was the commanding officer. So I figured he was in the Pacific Theater, because the European War didn't, my World War II history is especially timeline wise, is a little off, but right. The war is absolutely a character in this film, a character. It motivates everything that is happening on that island, and motivated the story to the point it got to.
Well, I mean, later on, the scene leading up to the drugstore, as we mentioned, is Oski pulls out a condom. He and Hermie are planning for their big hot date, and it's a condom that he inherited or was passed down to him from his older brother.
His brother gave it to him, yeah.
And I'm wondering, is that like an army ration, like government issue rubber or what?
Probably.
Because as we find out later, it expired or it went bad or something, and then later Oski is wearing a U.S. Army sweatshirt with the sleeves cut off.
That looked oddly 70s to me. That looked contemporary rather than, I don't think that people what do I know, but I don't think people would have worn a sweatshirt like that in summer of 42. It was odd to me. It looked like something from the 70s.
It did, and it also looked like commentary, kind of like at the end of Bonnie and Clyde when the sheriff steps out and he's very clearly like in the black shirt. I felt like the director, who was it Robert Mulligan?
Robert Mulligan, a very famous director.
It's like Yeah, he's like, he wanted to, look at this. This is important. But yeah, he made To Kill a Mockingbird 9 years before this.
Right.
This is a strange. Well, I don't know if he did
Well,
movies
you
between it,
get your
but
assignments, but he was the voice of the narrator at the end. I thought it was Herman Raucher. Turns
hmm,
out it was so sonorous and the way he talked.
it was, and it.
Classic voiceover at
Well,
the end of movies.
Well, the movie opens with that voiceover, and it's
Yes.
so, as you put it, sonorous that it felt very dry, as if, okay, this movie, I'm just going to be listening to a novel and I'm tuning out. This is, Gatsby all over again. Um, but there is a bit of a mystery that at the end I had to go back and flip back to the beginning to make sure I'd heard correctly, because Hermie, and he's looking back and kind of recounting the story to himself or the audience, but the way he describes falling in love with this older woman, played by Dorothy, played by Jennifer O'Neill, he said, no one had ever made me more sure, more insecure, more important, and less significant than this woman. And so I thought it was setting up for this great big Mrs. Robinson-esque, like, I'm going to toy with you and throw you away kind of a first time. It's so much simpler than that, that to hear him describe the encounter that way through the years of adulthood seems oddly off.
Well, interestingly enough, he did receive a letter from her when the movie came out.
Mm.
That was the only communication they had post the movie. They never talked to each other or saw each other. She didn't even put a return address on the letter, so he never followed up. He did, I guess, learn her last name, but she actually apologized to him because she thought that she had traumatized him, being, a 15-year-old boy and however old she was. But I think, the use of mourning or sadness, or you I don't want no spoiler alerts, but just the use of sadness as a positioning for seduction is very fascinating. That's what really was the strength of the film, in a sense. I liked the movie a lot. I thought it was honest. I thought it was authentic. You don't, you go to Porky's, for example, and there's nothing honest or authentic in it. It's just to show boobs and bush. We've got bush.
That's Revenge of the Nerds, sir.
Oh,
which has its own problems, but
that's been called a rapey movie.
Well, yes, for one very specific scene, which, I grew up on Revenge of the Nerds. My parents showed it to me when I was 8 years old. That's what the Simmons household was like back in the early 80s. And I had never considered that scene to be problematic, as the kids say, until like the last 5 years when they started writing stories about it. And now it's hard to defend, even with that whole, like, it was a different time and the characters were into it. And now I'm like, oh my God, did I just say that?
Yeah, it's unfortunate. You just have to move on.
Yeah.
I when that whole controversy came out, I was like, oh man, it's been 15 years since I've seen that movie. I have no idea really what they're talking about. And now I have no reason to go back and see it.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting case because, well, I guess there's that in the panty raid scene, but I mean, the one that people mostly have a problem with is it's like a minute of screen time that I think if you took that out or even just ignored it, it's not like it's a movie about these horny college kids who go around, assaulting women. It's a totally different context. And that's what I think one of the things that draws such a contrast with this movie. It's not structured like a traditional comedy, although parts of it are very funny. It's almost more like the Wonder Years as a sex comedy.
Right. Also, too, I read this online when I was doing research. Somebody called it a painting on film.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, that's there, because there's several stretches where there's very little dialogue. A lot of Mooney looking out and the whole seduction scene is there's maybe 2 lines of dialogue, 1 line. I mean, silence in a film is very rarely done. And if you're going to do it, you better damn well do it well, or make it, a passionate part of the film. And I think they did. So
Yeah, there's this great, nostalgic haze throughout the entire thing, as if you're watching it through the fog of memory, almost literally.
right.
And I think, you've referred to it a couple of times as the seduction, and I think that's an apt way to put it. Although it's where he loses his virginity to that older
Right.
woman, but there's nothing seductive about it. It's just sort of like this loneliness. I don't.
Yeah,
I feel
loneliness,
like
yeah.
I feel like if he could have had better circumstances for his first time, he would have, taken it. But it's almost like they were reaching out to each other, and he was comforting her in a way that she felt she needed to be comforted.
Well, I
The
also believe for a first time, at least, I mean, obviously it stayed in his memory forever. It's like it was a significant first time. Now, if you ask me, I could give you a rundown of it, but I don't even remember the girl's name. It was a one night stand. Hey, some confessions of the Uber critic.
Well, I'm glad if you knew her name, I wouldn't want you to mention it here.
No,
But
no, I would not do that.
I remember the movie that was playing at the theater when it happened with me. Mel Gibson's Ransom, opening night. Anyway,
I'll look up the year, sir.
1996. But and we went to see it afterwards. So that's anyway.
Wow.
But here's TMI. I'm going to cut that part out. No. Here's the thing. The cinematography, the filmmaking tells an entirely complete story. There's an arc to the filmmaking that follows the arc of the characters, because Dorothy, we don't even find out her name until almost the very end of the movie, which fits in with the idea that she is just an object. There is something to be said for women as sex objects in the minds of teenage boys, because they just see something, a beautiful, attractive creature with all these parts they're not allowed to see or think about or touch.
Right.
They're not even really people until you get into that relationship phase, which takes a while to navigate your way into anyway.
Right.
So when he meets her, he's helping her with the groceries up to her house, and he's pretending to be all mature, trying to talk like an adult, quote unquote. She's inviting him for coffee, burns his mouth. It's all very charming. But the way that she is shot, she's very attractive. The sun and the camera love her. She's all very well put together. She's wearing these kind of sporty outfits.
Yeah.
But then in that last scene, he goes in, and I think you're right to not spoil what, leads up to this, but there's whiskey on the table and a lit cigarette, and it's all dark, and she's not made up, and you can tell that she's, very upset. The scales fall away from his eyes in much the same way that we're almost invited to see her not as this kind of a mythical creature, but as a person who's got her own, like there's her own summer of 42 happening, off screen. We've been following Hermie the entire time, but she's got an entire movie happening with what happened with her.
And it also plays back into the war as a character, because the war motivates the reason she's there, the reason that it ends up the way it does. Is it Hermie's brother who's in the war, or Oski's brother? But
I think it's Oski. I was a little confused by this, because at one point Hermie mentions having a brother, but then he also makes reference to having a sister, but I couldn't tell which one was supposed to be the joke.
Right. But it just, everybody has that thing hanging over him. And I liked your point about the cinematography being connected to the arcs of the characters, and how it comes to an ending point itself. So interesting. I was also I thought was remarkable is that this was the era where you could have a beach house and nobody, it wasn't to invest or create this fantasy on the beach. It was just a house. and it probably either was rented or if you could buy one, it was like $2,000 maybe. I don't know, but it was just it was definitely a more innocent era of intervention when it came to being at the beach. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's a great point because I mean we're inside Dorothy's house much more than we see like the boys' residences.
Hmm.
But for as romantic as it sounds like, oh, it's this older woman in a beach house. Not that the house looks dumpy, it's just rather kind of unimpressive.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
just there.
yeah, you think you're right. When we think of beach house now, it's like something you'd see on Cribs or Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous or some other
Exactly.
reference that's too old for me to mention it. But yeah, just seeing it as this, especially in the daylight at the end of the movie, I almost thought that it was boarded up because in the daylight it has a completely different aesthetic to it. It's very plain and almost looks abandoned.
Yeah, I mean, it adds again to the character of this cinematic moment that's going to happen inside the house. Michel Legrand, the guy who wrote "The Summer Knows," which is the name of the song, um, I remember it very well because my girlfriend in high school got a solo in our swing choir, and she sang "The Summer Knows," and one of the lyrics is "and unafraid it sheds its clothes," and everybody's like, but anyway, he also wrote. He had a streak, man. He wrote "The Hands of Time" a year earlier, Brian's song.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Same composer. And then Robert Mulligan had an incredible streak himself. He did "To Kill a Mockingbird," "Love with a Proper Stranger," which is Steve McQueen and Natalie Wood, "Baby, the Rain Must Fall," which is one of the great titles of all time, and "Inside Daisy Clover." Those were four in a row from the 60s that are pretty much considered, um, symbolic of the era.
Hmm.
It was four in a row.
And was this, do you know how this movie did? Was it successful or, I mean,
I
it's,
didn't get a box office score on it. It cost $1 million to make. I assume it made some money, because it was, again, different. And I think before I saw it, I heard about it. So I'm
Mhm.
saying maybe I read Mad Magazine like I heard of every other movie. I read it in Mad Magazine before I could go and see it. But this was an R-rated movie when it came out, and it was changed into PG-13 later in its life. Because there's no nudity. You're right.
There isn't, and that's something that the ratings are all very odd. I
Oh,
watched one of the Hammer Dracula films recently, and there's a scene where Christopher Lee gets basically a tree trunk shoved through his chest as the head vampire, and there's blood gushing everywhere. That movie was rated G in its time. And now Summer of 42, when I looked up the rating before I pressed play, I'm like, oh, maybe there's more in here than I had heard of or remember, but no, it's completely tame by today's standards. Thematically, the worst you can say is possibly language and the maturity of the subject matter as far as what these boys are plotting to do with their summer.
well, I think that nudity in a film, unless it's specific to the plot, is pretty much gone with the wind now, with the new, with the new sensitivity.
Hmm.
I'm not saying it's good or bad, just is.
I'm saying it's bad, but hey, I said I was a teenage boy once. I didn't say I grew out of it.
So yeah, a really interesting film to. Oh, another great scene I thought is Oski is playing the violin, the harmonica outside the druggist before he goes in and asks for condoms, and he's playing a song that's somewhat familiar but not. And he goes in, he has the first thing, he comes outside, and he starts whistling Jingle Bells.
Yes.
And I said, that's just so brilliant. We know there's a song going in his head, and suddenly he knows what it is, and he whistles it. I just like, that's a nice touch.
Well, yeah, it is weird because it's part Jingle Bells and part this other tune that I'm
Right.
like, is that just another song? Because I can remember it's not Jingle Bells, but there are like two Christmas songs, I think, that sound very similar to each other. They have the same kind of cadence, and once you figure out which they are, it'll drive you crazy. Um, I want to ask you about Benji. He's the third wheel in this
Yeah.
tricycle of horny boys. He disappears, about halfway through the movie, and he's not really much of a presence.
Well, I think he represents that side of adolescence that just is not there yet. You know, again, it was like I said, my best friend, he was hot to trot. And I was like, I don't get this. I don't understand why you're so hot to trot. I mean, I like girls and everything, and I knew of their allure, but it just hadn't hit, And then 2 years later, I was joining the club. It's just weird. And,
well,
and people are different, and I think Benji was just different. He just ran away when he was going to get a date. He just boom.
And this gets to the heart of my question is I'm wondering how different was he? Because it's in some of the earlier dialogue, he gets teased by his quote unquote best friends about possibly being gay. I mean, the H word is all over this movie.
Yeah,
and
that was him, odd.
I didn't think it was so much odd because it's it's the 70s and it was better than the F word, I guess.
Well, that didn't exist in the 40s, but did homo exist? I guess it did.
Possibly.
As a pejorative, I mean, I was like, did that really exist in the 40s? Because you would have to have known that, and they were very young, and for them to know that they're gay men didn't fly with me. And but unless they were just using it as a way to make fun of people, I don't know.
Well, it's kind of like I imagine because this is way before social media or mass communication of
Yes.
So they probably, if they knew what it was, they probably heard it secondhand from a parent or maybe one of their older army buddies who had heard something about it. It's like, what is that? It's a guy who likes to kiss a guy, or maybe it's something completely different. It reminds me of in Stand By Me, one of the kids calls Gordy, I think, a morphodite. Which is just this kind of like ambiguously, weird name to call someone, and yet it's supposed to be this insult that's mortifying. But yeah, I wondered about that kind of unspoken, possibly gay angle for this, because they never resolve it. The character never comes back into the movie. He's just sort of meant to be insulted and kind of endearing because he runs away from the big scary girl, and then we never see him again.
He's the one that provided the sex manual, and I was like, well, what kind of sex manual was this in the 1940s?
Was this?
I mean, I'm sure that Herman Raucher could tell me, but he's dead. So,
was this the Masters and Johnson era, or was that after this?
No, that was afterward. The Kinsey report was afterward too. I'm sure there were manuals, but I don't think it was in a book form like they were showing. I don't know.
Because they had photos apparently too.
Yeah. And I was like, I'm questioning this again. Like I was questioning, did Now Voyager come out in the summer? And I never looked it up, but then on IMDb in the trivia section, they said no. It did not. Came out in October.
Well, maybe it's such a wealthy beachside community. They got it early.
Yeah. So there were investors in the film and they wanted to get audience reaction. That makes sense.
Oh man, I was going to say something. I totally lost it. Damn it.
And everybody, I was thinking about this too. Everybody has a summer that changes everything.
Yeah.
Everybody does. I mean, I'd have to think about it, but I know there were certain summers where I wasn't the same person when school started or whatever. And mostly, again, it has to do with adolescence. But, we all go through that too. The summer that everything changes.
Yeah. I do remember what I was going to say, and it goes back to that beach scene with Miriam and Oski, tied to the whole sex manual, because I think they find there are like 12 steps to intercourse. One is foreplay, and then they don't really go into the others, except that they're all Latin, because all these guys were Latin who invented this stuff, don't you know? But then when it gets to the beach, and it's that kind of weird sitcom-y trope where there's the one double date going on, and Oski's yelling from over the dune like, "Hey, Hermie, come here, come here! I need a condom," and they keep going back like, "What number are you on?" And he's like, "We just got to number 6, but she's on number 9."
Right.
And every time Oski comes back, he's in a different state of undress. Like first he's got the ripped shirt, and then he's in like his jeans, and then he's just in boxers, and then like the horrified looks of Hermie and his date when they look over that ridge was just priceless. But what struck me was, Oski is probably also a different guy after this summer. He's not going to open up about the sensitivity of his feelings, but he was totally unprepared, as I kind of alluded to beforehand. And it was almost like a traumatizing experience for him, I felt.
Well, if I had to give this a star rating, I'd be 4 out of 5. I really did like it, and I liked exploring it. There's an innocence to this film, both in the production and the timing and the story, that you really don't find in movies anymore. Nobody gets this personal. This is truly a personal film.
The closest I can think of, and I have not seen all of it, weirdly enough, is Barry Jenkins' Moonlight from a few years ago.
No, yeah, boy, ding, ding, ding. Yeah, that's definitely in the same category of personal stories. The thing about the third act of that, which I love, it's almost like a one-act play, but it's been set up by 2 segments that you're saying, these 2 segments in your head. So every line in the third act becomes significant because of the way that they're, interplay in that one. Boy, that's something. That's a good call.
Well, thanks. It reminds me, I have to go back and finish that because I never watched. I got to the beginning of the third segment. I think I had watched it late, and by the time I got to it, I'm like, I can't handle the rest of this right now.
Yeah, that'd be a tough one after 8:30, as they say.
Yeah, but no,
you give it a star rating?
Well, before I get to that, I want to ask.
Okay.
You gave it 4 out of 5. What keeps it from being a 5 for you?
Well, again, I think my discomfort level. It brought back the feelings of discomfort when I watched it as a kid. I still don't like that kind of male banter. I've never liked it. And I recall when I saw it as a kid, and it all came flooding back, I was like, I couldn't watch it because I was so uncomfortable, because I had friends that were like that. Everybody does. And yet, you have to almost endure it if you're not. I probably was Benji and back in the day, the sensitive boy who couldn't hear any sex talk. So, but yeah, and also too, it was a bit dated, I have to say. I felt that, again, the 70s sensibility through a 40s memory was there, but now we're in 2021. So 50 years ago, dude, that's a 50-year-old film. How old is Jerry Hauser now? If they were all 15 or so, he's 65, 70.
So he would be about the age of Harvey Weinstein. No, I'm not drawing any comparisons there.
Your Weinsteinian theory is very interesting.
But no, so it's interesting to me because your criticisms, you're lopping off that star, and this is not a criticism of you, but it strikes me that it's all kind of subjective. The movie took you back to these awkward feelings of not wanting to be around these types of boys, but it strikes me as it's so authentic that it feels like it should be a 5 out of 5, but just as a personal level, you can't bring yourself to give it that recommendation.
Exactly. I mean, you nailed it. I like he nailed Christopher.
I did not. Sorry.
Well, another interesting thing is, Jerry Hauser and Maureen Stapleton are the only 2 people I know that went beyond. Now, Gary Grimes, once you say his name, I'm like, okay, what was he in? Because I know, so those 3, and Grimes is on the second level. Everybody else faded away, didn't do anything. Even Lou Frizzle, who played the druggist.
And that's kind of a shame. He's he's only on screen for like 5 minutes, but
yeah,
and I think that gets to the casting and the direction of this movie, because
yeah,
I have seen this scene in other movies. It reminds me of the buying liquor in Teen Wolf. It reminds me of the buying
nice,
condoms in the remake of The Blob. Those are
nice.
all played for laughs, and the people in the scene know that they're playing comic archetypes. This guy is just, it felt so real. There's no
Yeah,
pretense to it. There's no
no,
punchline, no stinger.
right, right. And again, it you can almost hear the thoughts of the druggist as it goes ding. So he has two choices: get out of my store, you're too young, or get a good laugh because he orders 4 dozen. That'll be $12, which is the equivalent of $120 these days.
There was something great about that condom math, and him treating the kid like an adult in that sense. Like, he lays
Yes,
out the 4 boxes of condoms, like,
yes.
which one do you want? Like, there's different
I
kinds, like,
mean,
oh, the
he's
usual one.
enjoying the moment,
Yeah.
even though he knows he's going to sell it to him. He's enjoying the moment, and it really, really, really played out well.
Or maybe he feels like he's gonna kind of scare the kids straight.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's possible.
Maybe there's a
That's
chance that
possible.
he'll just be like, I can't just, here's the 12 cents for the ice cream, because he got the sprinkles, of course. Here's another thing. I kind of want to time travel back to this beach, because I'm sorry, 12 cents for a triple strawberry cone with sprinkles. My
So
God.
obviously, a single scoop is like 4 cents or 5 cents or whatever. If he
Like
was rounding it up.
3. What? Yeah, the math doesn't quite add up. Because it'd
See,
be like
and
3, 6,
this
9, and then 11. I guess there's tax, but
this is the curse of the middle class, because back in the war era, 50s, 60s, you didn't have to treat your money like an accountant. Where it is, what balance sheet it is, blah blah. Now everybody does, or you're screwed. So, but back then, you made, I don't know, 1,500 a year, and you knew exactly where it was budgeted to. And if the kid wanted to go out and get an ice cream, here's a dime. Go get an ice cream. Now it's like, God, I mean, Margie's, and we have a Culver's near our house now, and a sundae is close to $7.
oh yeah. I mean, the prices of everything are just like through the roof. I mean, this is, I don't know how much of this is COVID related or what, but
Right?
back in my day, which granted, I'm talking like 20, 30 years ago, you go to McDonald's to get their cheeseburger value meal, it was like $3 or $4. And now it's like $8.50. I'm like, it's 2 cheeseburgers, French fries, and a Coke. What is this
Yeah,
nonsense?
yeah, it's crazy. I just, I don't know. I feel like grandpa when I talk about it, because, well, here's a perfect example too. When I first came to Chicago, to sit in the bleachers at Wrigley Fields is $5. Now the top ticket face value is like $150. $150.
Oh, talk
I
about
couldn't
cursed.
imagine having that kind of just cash, like casual cash like that. But
Ugh.
people do, or they wouldn't be charging it.
That's true. Yeah. The one good thing about the increasing prices in fast food is I think twice before,
Right.
just
Well,
I could
it's
just stay
funny
home and make a
because
sandwich for like $1.
it's hilarious that you say that, because it, all the things that are bad for you are, you're going to pay $5 for a bag of potato chips when ultimately it's bad for you. No, I can easily say, no, I'm not going to get that. So yeah, it's weird. It's just, it blows my mind. Ice cream, you might as well take a loan out from the bank. Besides going to Culver's and Margie's, just go to the grocery store. My God, it starts the lowest end, even for the crappy store brand, starts at about 3 or 4.
Right. And you can eat it for like half a week or more. You could feed,
Exactly.
yeah, but people like their
Here we
convenience.
are.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm right here in
This is
senior,
what nostalgia does. The summer of '42.
very much so. I
Da,
mean,
da, da.
Can you imagine? Are people going to be making movies like the summer of 2012?
Wow. That's interesting that you say that, because think about George Lucas made American Graffiti in 1971, 72. I don't know, 72, I think, or 73. Anyway, can you imagine somebody in 2022 saying, I'm going to do a movie about my high school days 10 years ago? Well, there's nothing, there's no change. There's nothing. But Lucas, so much had happened during the 60s that he was able to look back on that nostalgically only 10 years after it happened. It's incredible, and still have the Vietnam thing and the cruising and all that culture was gone by 72. All of it. Vietnam was a disaster. People, there were lines at the gas lines. You couldn't cruise, gas. In 62, a gallon of gas was a quarter. That's why you could cruise. Everybody bring a quarter. We'll get 3 gallons. We're cruising.
Well, and then
it meant something else later.
Well, yeah, we'll leave Al Pacino out of this. But,
that's a great movie, by the way, William Friedkin.
Which I've never seen.
Ooh.
Yeah. But it brings to mind the Back to the Future thing. There's like a meme saying in 1985, going back 30 years to 1955 is a huge difference. But if you're to make Back to the Future today, it'd be like you're going back to what, 1990? I mean, there's differences, sure, but it's not that crazy drastic.
So radical. Right. Although, hey, technology is a big hurdle. Because if you go back to 1991, that's 30 years ago, there's no cell phones in general,
Except for the big Zach Morris phones, yeah.
And so, that's a little different. But you're right, it's still the same crass consumerism. I mean, that's a major difference from 85 to 55. He walks into the local diner, everything's casual, Pepsi free. It ain't free, kid. That'll be a dime. That's a great bit.
Hey, what's with the life preserver? Hey, I have a proposal for next month.
Yes,
you're always pitching me stuff. I'd like to pitch you something.
Yeah,
and
please.
This may be something you've seen so many times you don't want to talk about it, but I have never seen this movie, and it's come up a couple of times here.
Okay.
American Graffiti.
I would re-explore that.
Okay.
I would re-explore that. I have seen a number of times, but I haven't seen it in a long time. Easily Excellent. 20, 30. Jesus, see, I can do that now. But yeah, definitely American Graffiti. Our summer theme, our summer nostalgia theme continues in either end of July or early August. So
I love it, and it'll be the end of Innocence, because then September is rolling around, and that's the 20th anniversary of when. Well, you want to talk about big changes?
Yeah.
Here's a weird thing. I'm going to be talking about this with David Fowley coming up, but do you remember the 1976 King Kong?
Yes.
I saw it for the first time. I watched it in 2 parts, but I finished it last night to see, because I know in the original, it was the Empire State Building he climbs up.
Right.
In the 70s, because they were still brand spanking new at that point, he ascends the Twin Towers, and my God, especially the scene where he slaps that helicopter and it flies right into the building. It's surreal. Yeah,
man. I mean, it's in Trading Places, Home Alone. Is it Home Alone 2 or 1? It's in
2, I think, because that's when he was lost in New York.
And then, of course, Godspell. We talked about it. They're on top of the goddamn tower. I'm not saying go and listen to it, but the Robin Lamont interview was just great.
Yeah.
She talked about that scene because it was still under construction. How they got up there, all the cast and crew had to climb up a ladder to get to the top. And she said, once we were up there, that was nothing to protect us from going 110 down.
Yeah, that was a great interview, and hearing you recount that story, I have a big fear of heights, and just listening to you say that, I was like, oh, I'm getting chills. But no, now I'm just imagining like King Kong up on top of the World Trade Center, and like the cast of Godspell is also up there dancing and trying not to get stepped on.
Well, Or the cast of Godspell is up there dancing when the guy walks across, the man on wire. What the hell? I thought I was the only one that thought of this. Because that was around the same era.
It was.
They did in 72, he did in 74.
This is
And
completely.
still the tower wasn't done by then.
Well, I'm saying it's completely tasteless, but we are coming up with the World Trade Center cinematic universe.
Oh, Jesus Christ. The WTCU.
The WTCCU. Oh, wow.
Oh, God damn it.
Pretty much. All right. I think that's a good place as any to leave it.
That's a good way to end this, I think.
Although Summer of 42, I am probably right there with you as the 4 out of 5.
Yeah.
But I kind of feel like it could be a 5 out of 5 as well. I need to see it again as an adult.
I know, and I also know that you don't work with the ratings, and I understand that. I just sometimes it helps me center my focus before. Like I watched the film and I did my notes and I said, okay, what would I give it if I was rating it today? And that's one that came up. So it helps me. Okay, now I know how I'm focusing on the whole thing. It's bizarre, but it's just I've always done ratings. So
well, and that's fine. It's nothing wrong with having a benchmark. But all right, well, so next month we'll come back. We'll talk American Graffiti. That'll be fun. It's a movie that is like my great white whale. My bucket list. I've got so many of them that I got to catch up on.
Summer of nostalgia continues on Kicking the Seat.
Promise me you're not going to do that during the show next time, please. No. All right, Pat. Thanks again.
Cheers, brother.
Yeah, I'll catch you later, man. Be well.
Blessings.
Blessings. Bye.